Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. All the attendees from various countries. I'm told we already have people from Kuwait, Indonesia, Philippines, India, Australia, of course, beyond watching all of us. And I am absolutely delighted with the kind of panel we have today. This is OneFold webinar. This is the fifth in the series. We have had 1 month long engagement with Australia starting from 4th of July. In the past few weeks, we have been discussing issues like, of course, there were certain topics connected with remote learning, but when we have also talked on leadership, learning to lead early, we have been in the past weeks discussions, we have talked about how the remote learning has can be, or what challenges the rural areas are facing, and how the remote learning is happening with the challenged, the underprivileged section of people. And then we have talked about collaboration using communities of practices in Sahodia and India. And my personal favorite has been the discussion that children had. There were 5 students from Australia and 3 students from India, and they had not just discussed the challenges, they also brought out a lovely solutions how these remote learning can, how the processes can get better. So that has been amazing. And now I look forward to this OneFold webinar, which is 5th in the series. We will be discussing developing global citizens, which is yes, dear to my heart, and the people who are there in the panel have really worked on in this particular field. I have I don't see Kathy on the screen. I hope she's there. Yeah. Let me first introduce Kathelin Kirby, who's director with Asia Education Foundation, Melbourne, Victoria. She's been joined by Hamish, who's executive director with the Asia Education Foundation. And we have Dr. Amita Mulla Wattal, who's a principal Springdales Schools, Pusa Road, India. We would like to, since all these people have, they are all seasoned and mature, I'm really looking forward to 1 hour of enriching session and a whole lot of learning and a whole lot of enlightenment. I would request Hamish to take on first. I've heard through you and at other channels that Victoria is working on, probably the entire Australia is working on global citizenship. At the moment they are working on this. It will be nice if you could start the session and you talk about that first. Hamish has been little about Hamish. Hamish is the executive director of the Asia Education Foundation, as I just mentioned, at Asia Link. He collaborates with an incredible team to lead the intercultural learning of students and educators across Australia and Asia Pacific. Hamish has a rich background in leading education and design learning. Previously based with the international design thinking firm Notosh, Hamish worked closely with schools, businesses, and cultural organizations around Australia and Asia in designing better learning through immersive processes and prototyping. Hamish has also worked at State Library of Victoria as an education manager, where he developed numerous learning programs for education and public audiences alike. Hamish started his career as a leading teacher working in the UK, Japan, and Melbourne. Over to you, Hamish.
Thank you very much, Rita, and very much thank you to OneFold International and the Indirapuram Public Schools for this opportunity to talk with you about developing global citizenship. I would like to take just about 5 minutes to really give you a couple of key points that I think the work that we've been doing at the Asia Education Foundation that helps build that global citizenship. And I want to share just a couple of slides with you. So in the context of this work, we often hear that this space of global citizenship always comes back this idea of creating world-class education. And I would actually say that if we really want a world-class education system, then you need your classes linked to the world. And it sounds simple enough, but often the whole idea of academic or just the spaces of school become an identifier of world-class. But if we want our classes linked to the world, they want to be linked not just digitally, but cognitively, as well as empathetically, being able to understand how they're connected to the world. Now, with the work that we do, and I'm based at the University of Melbourne in Victoria in Australia, and we're actually based with an organisation at the university called Asia Link. And we see ourselves as being part of Australia's leading centre for creative engagement with Asia. And the Asia Education Foundation has been doing this work for nearly 30 years. So what does this actually look like in this work? And obviously, this whole idea of trying to really connect our young people in trying to, as we say, see the world through someone else's eyes. And obviously now with technology, with all of you joining from wherever you are in the world, being able to understand ways we can do that now, not just through these technologies, but even through other technologies that are also virtual, like the Google Cardboard boxes here that we've been developing to allow students to use even mobile phones to create both synchronous and asynchronous ways to experience the world. So there's two kind of approaches to our work. Firstly, we work with educators, we work with youth, and we also work with a whole range of other stakeholders and advocates in that work of developing intercultural learning. And our key offerings are through three key channels: international education partnerships, and we do much of that across about over 20 different countries, developing professional learning and youth programs that both can be short and long term, and then getting into more education research and development. What are the current things that we know, and what are the next horizons that we want to work towards? So there are just two key things I want to highlight for you. And the first of which is about creating short and immersive ways to develop global citizens. And I think this is important because these can be quite powerful, very brief experiences. We do this through day-long forums or summits, through bringing networks of schools together, possibly even in webinars like this. And some of the examples we do are creating youth forums where youth get an opportunity to behave much like a model UN, as well as engaging in debate and design on the future of learning. And that's not only just looking at trade or climate change, but also using these fields of STEM, the Sustainable Development Goals, and doing very much the same for adults. I think if we design engaging learning for children, we know that that same engaging learning works really well for adults. And what that often looks like is in getting young people to share their ideas in very active ways, but in doing it so that students understand that this is about real issues and real dialogue. As you can see here, some students talking about SDG 4 on quality education. And when teachers observe students doing this, this is what teachers actually say. They suddenly realize that students are able to step up. They are able to take some ownership, and they do have that agency to understand their role in the world. The other way to frame this work is by doing long and impactful work. And this takes much longer times of investment, a more scaffolded program. And we can do this through term or semester or year-long engagements, but really developing collaborative partnerships and deeper engagement. And this is where we work with school leaders and school communities to do that. And some of the examples we do at the AEF is through, we do a Growing Global Citizens course. We do our Bridge School Partnerships program, which I'll mention in just a moment. We're developing a new school partnerships model called Nexus in creating a networked way to approach this learning. We also work with a specific program in Papua New Guinea, working with school leaders, teachers and young people together in a secondary school partnership. And we've also just begun a new model of a year-long engagement called Harvested, which is a youth program designed for rural and remote parts of Australia to engage agricultural education as a way to drive global citizenship. Just a brief comment on that professional learning. We're actually running a course that just started on Friday last week in Victoria with the Department of Education here that's called Building Global Citizenship. It's a 6-month course that's all online, that's created all sorts of network opportunities, even in this current COVID period of lockdown. And we're really there looking to drive that deeper engagement in what leading a school community looks like, using data analysis and creating much wider networks and business models for school leaders. There's an action research cycle built into this and a school-based project that they must undertake. And one of the underpinning elements of here that I'm sure is familiar to many of you is then using that cycle of design thinking in moving from the critical thinking of that deep understanding of knowledge and data into more the creative thinking of, now that I have a key understanding, what are the big ideas that are going to drive change? And we know that this works for adults as well as for young people. Just as a point on the Bridge program that I mentioned before, this has been going since 2008 and is a name of a program which, as you can see there, stands for Building Relationships Through Intercultural Dialogue and Growing Engagement. And we're working with partnerships right across Asia Pacific in engaging these school partnerships between Australia and the Asia Pacific region in developing deep collaborative learning that drives curriculum, teacher professional learning, student experiential learning, as well as all sorts of long-term relationships. And often what that looks like, including one of our recent partnerships, we've been working with a number of school teachers in Delhi, in India, is not only that really rich experience of teachers collaborating and designing learning together, as well as experiencing themselves the kinds of technology that young people create, but then the kinds of projects that allow students to develop their own ideas. And the images you see here is from a school in New South Wales and a school in India, where the students collaborated on a drama performance all online, and then eventually the students were able to perform that piece together. And it's really wonderful to see that kind of student learning come about. Really, at the end of it, our key role here is to be able to equip educators and students with that intercultural learning and the global perspectives to navigate that shared future together. And I think that's where developing global citizens is a really, really powerful way to do that. So I'll leave it there, Rita, and hand it back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hamish. Thank you so much. My team tells me that I was not visible in the beginning, so I just introduced myself once. Hi, this is Rita Singh, Director, Indirapuram Group of Institutions, and we are into the 5th webinar of the month-long engagement with Australia. And this particular webinar is in collaboration, of course, with OneFold, but then I'm so glad the Asia Education Foundation has also come on in. Before I come to the next speaker, that will be Miss Kathelin Kirby, I have a quick question for you, Hamish. You talked about this Building Global Citizenship program, which is a 6-month-long course. Is it open only to Victorian students?
Yes, Rita. Actually, at this stage, it's only open to Victorian school leaders. But the Growing Global Citizens course that we're offering at the moment is also an opportunity where we're hoping to get more funding to involve other international educators.
Okay. Thank you. I come back to you. I have a whole lot of questions from your presentation. We'll come back to you. Next speaker, we have Ms. Kathelin Kirby. Kathelin Kirby. She has a long history in education, having worked as a teacher educator, policymaker, and founding head of a not-for-profit national education organization, which is Asia Education Foundation at the University of Melbourne, where she worked for over 20 years, leading work in professional learning, curriculum development, policy development, and advocacy. She is currently Director Research of the Asia Education Foundation, Executive Director of the Global Education Leaders Partnership, and Principal Education Consultant to the Australian Learning Lecture. Kathy is also Board Director of Education Services Australia. Kathy has traveled to India many a times, but I have met her in Melbourne, not here. And she always loves doing so, and we are hoping to have her over once this COVID situation gets any better. Kathy, since your work has been amazing and your work has resulted into so many policy changes in Australia, I hope to have the policy perspective, bring it into today's conversation, this conversation on global citizenship that we are talking about. You specifically mentioned there is National Declaration on Educational Goals for Young Australians. So it would be lovely to first start talking about maybe the educational goals for young Australians, and then you take on the conversation. Over to you, Kathy.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Rita. Really appreciate that introduction and very much appreciate the invitation to be here and to be with my good friends in India. It's fantastic. Now, I did have a PowerPoint, and was Mr. Singh going to put it on for me?
Say again? Yeah, Mohit, are you there?
Okay, beautiful. Thank you very much for that. And Mohit, I'll just let you know when to turn the slides. Thank you very much for driving this. So really this image on the screen, which is a close-up of the coronavirus, is one of the things that sort of brought us together here today. But there's also the United Nations, in a way, bring us together here. So in 2015, the United Nations made a really clear statement about what young people needed from their education. Yes, they need to learn to read and write and count, but today, more than ever, they need to be equipped with knowledge, skills and understandings to resolve the big global issues of our time, like sustainability, security, poverty and health. The COVID-19 pandemic provides a new urgency for all school students to be able to understand the world and to be equipped as global citizens, because perhaps never before have we seen such international cooperation and collaboration on the scale that we're seeing it at the moment. People right across the world working to develop tests and vaccines for COVID-19, cooperating on travel bans and security, sharing experience and data concerning lockdowns, or even opening up the great museums and galleries of the world for online learning for students anywhere, anytime. We've all called on all of our people to be active citizens in this time, both local and global, to be respectful, have empathy, and appreciate the needs of diverse others. We've seen remarkable examples of people collaborating in their communities and right around the globe. Some great projects of human spirit, singing and music and humour. But we've also experienced a dark side to the pandemic, particularly here in Australia. We've had outbursts of racism, initially towards Chinese Australians and then other Asia Australians, and in some cases to all migrant communities as we start to close down and close our borders and get worried. Fake and biased news has been an everyday occurrence that we all need critical thinking to navigate. The pressing need for respect and empathy and intercultural understanding and our capacity to be global citizens has really been laid bare in 2020. Could I have the next slide? I want to focus on some of the future-focused work that's occurred in international policy that's driving and supporting global citizenship in schools today. But you're right, Rita, I thought I'd start with Australia. Every 10 years, Australian federal and state education ministers agree on a set of goals for the next decade for Australian schools. And our current goals were just agreed to late last year in 2019. And they're called the Alice Springs or Murrumbeena National Declaration, named after the place in the Australian desert where ministers met to sign that agreement. And for the first time, our national education goals have acknowledged the Indigenous name of this place of signing, Murrumbeena. The Australian education goals are framed in the context of the world today and into the future, our children's future. And there's two main goals for all Australian students. The second goal states that every young Australian will exit their schooling understanding their responsibilities as global citizens. It's a key goal for us, for every student in Australia. Next slide. The Australian National Curriculum includes 7 general capabilities that are expected to be achieved by students by the time they leave school to assist them to be able to thrive in the world. And intercultural understanding is one of those capabilities that's central to being an active and informed global citizen, along with ethical understanding, critical and creative thinking, digital capability, and personal and social well-being. Intercultural understanding capability is embedded in all learning areas, kindergarten to year 10 for all Australian students. And we also in our curriculum have 3 cross-curriculum priorities. The first one is understanding our Indigenous people, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history and cultures. And the other 2 are globally focused. All young Australians to understand the region around us, Asia, and Australia's engagement with Asia, and all young Australians to understand the importance of sustainability, environmental sustainability, and how to achieve it. Next slide. So what did Australia's education focus on global citizenship? What sort of policies were we drawing on to put that together? So I just want to look very briefly at 3 big global influences that are relevant to all of us in both India and Australia. And the first one is UNESCO, who established the global citizenship education of one of its 3 education priorities in 2014. This really represented a conceptual shift in what UNESCO had previously said, in that it recognised the relevance of education in understanding and resolving global issues in their social, political, cultural, economic and environmental dimensions. And it also acknowledged that education had to build values, soft skills and attitudes amongst learners that would facilitate international cooperation and promote social transformation. UNESCO said that global citizenship education had a critical role to play with young people navigating the world, that we needed to develop their attitudes, deep knowledge of global issues, cognitive skills to think critically and creatively, non-cognitive skills like empathy and conflict resolution, communication skills, the ability to act collaboratively and responsibly. These were all things that every student, not just some students, every student, whether they're in India or Australia or anywhere else in the world, needed to have to be able to thrive in our world. Next slide. In 2018, the OECD included for the first time the assessment of global competence. They included it in the PISA tests, the Program for International Student Assessment. It was that usually is about maths and literacy, but for the first time they included global competence. Unfortunately, it was optional, and only 16 countries out of a possible 65 chose to actually implement that test. And disappointingly, Australia was not one of those countries. The results, the OECD will release those results in October this year. And I know that Hamish and I are really interested to know who are the countries who took part in that test and how globally competent are their students. Next slide. The OECD outlined 4 dimensions of global competence that people need to apply successfully in their everyday life. The capacity to examine issues and situations of local, global and cultural significance. The capacity to understand and appreciate the perspectives and worldviews of others. The ability to engage in open, appropriate and effective interactions across cultures. And to be equipped to take action for collective well-being and sustainable development. Next slide. Possibly the most powerful international influence driving global citizenship education in our schools right now is working together, all of us in every country, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Sustainable Development Goals were agreed to by the United Nations. They're intended to be a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all of us. They address the global challenges we all face related to poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace and justice. And the goal is to achieve them by 2030, so we don't leave anybody behind. And my last slide. When I was putting together, thinking about this presentation, I wanted, next slide please, I wanted to finish with the eloquent and powerful words of the famous Indian writer Arundhati Roy from an article that she just wrote in April this year in the Financial Times, just at the time when COVID was really starting to impact on all of us. Arundhati Roy gives us a challenge. She says, let's make this world a better place as the result of the disruption of the coronavirus. And Rita, when I was thinking about this webinar today, I thought that's our challenge. That's our challenge as school educators.
True.
How might we equip our young people to imagine a better world and to fight for it? Thank you.
True. That really leaves us with this thought, and it's intriguing, it's challenging. These are the challenges of present, and But this is also the time when we can actually make a difference. Everybody's innovating and everybody's trying to make a difference. Everybody's contributing. And most beautiful is the collaboration which is happening among everybody. I mean, whether it's within the school or intra-school or intra-country, inter-country, it's amazing. That's how we are all, I mean, amazing. And I like the educational goal that you drafted, that you talked about, and it very aptly talks about how it is important for the students to understand their responsibilities as global citizens and know how they can actually impact or bring in the positive change. And that is where our focus to the challenges of 21st century comes in. And you actually talked about how in your global citizenship curriculum, if I may call it, is also including all these, not just the digital literacy, but collaboration and cognitive, non-cognitive angles to it, and social relationships and management of our personal relations and things like that. When I was trying to curate this webinar and was finalizing a person from India, because since it was an Asia Education Foundation, we had already decided on Hamish and Kathy to begin with, and I had to choose a person from India. And frankly, within a flash of seconds, a person who came into my mind was Dr. Amita Mulla Wattal. So I was very, because I know her school, and under her leadership, there's so much of global citizenship has been learned, has happened, has been picked up and impacted. But surprisingly, when I actually called her up to actually discuss the content of the webinar and to kind of give my personal wish list, what she should cover, she was totally vehement in changing the direction. She brought in a very, very different perspective. She talked about this is the times have brought in a lot of inequalities. She talked about how SDGs can actually throw in a, Hamish also covered SDG to a certain extent. So she brought in a very totally different perspective. Probably if I talk about it even a little bit, I will be spoiling the flavor. So I would invite Mrs. Dr. Amita Wattal, but before that, I will just tell people a little about her. I don't know whether I can cover what all she has done in a few minutes. She, of course, is the principal of Springdales. Besides that, she's a manager of Springdales Jaipur branch. She's founder, principal, and executive member of the Springdales branch at Dubai. She's chairperson of GIEN, which is a Global Inclusive Education Network. And then she's a National Advisory Committee for the Inclusive Education. She's done an amazing job in inclusive education. She continues to do that. And she's, of course, we all know, former chairperson of a very elite body in India, National Progressive Schools Conference. And her sphere is not just the education, but the creative arts, special needs education, communicative English, street theatre, women's education, peace studies, and curriculum development. And she has been in this field since last 4 decades, an icon for all of us. And she has had National Teachers Award from the President of India. She has, of course, got Endeavour Award. We talked about it from Australian government. And she has been former member of World Council of Churches, Geneva for Education, Peace and Human Rights. And she's in managing board of several schools and B.Ed colleges of the country presently. And she has edited, collated, written a whole lot of books on primarily on education. She has helped with CBSE in their Hubs of Learning, which is the latest project we did talk about in our last webinar when we talked about Sahodia and COP. And she's worked on their affiliation manual. She's a part of a member of School Award Committee. She's in various committees of affiliation process and various committees which are working for betterment of CBSE, which impacts directly the Indian education system. I am sure I haven't really said enough about her. Ma'am, over to you with your new perspective.
Thank you very much, Rita. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Right. So firstly, I just would like to say that, you know, when I saw Kathy Kirby here, and of course Hamish, I felt wonderful, because I would say that in many ways, India, its teachers and its students have been beneficiaries of the Asia Education Foundation. I mean, the Asia Education Foundation is one that resonates with the whole understanding of student agency, teacher voice, interconnectedness. In fact, whatever Hamish, I would say that whatever I saw in Hamish's presentation, whatever Kathy spoke about, is absolutely what the interconnectedness of the Asian Foundation believes in the various countries that it operates. And for the last 20 years, I have been associated with it in marvelous ways. We've had Senator Evans coming in, and I had at the time when he was the education minister and then we had about 40 children who came in from Ballarat, and the AEF made it happen, because I would think that they had never stepped out of Ballarat, leave alone come to India, and it was absolutely amazing that they were here and the kind of cultural connections that were made. And recently we had the Deputy Premier, Mr. James Malino, who it came to Springdales, along with another 40 students. So the kind of work that Victoria is doing in education is absolutely amazing. And I'm a little sort of partial towards the state of Victoria, because I do think that it's an education system that is very, very progressive and very happening. And it's great to know and to see how the whole understanding of global citizenship education is moving forwards. So what I would like to start off by saying is that, essentially right now we are really grappling with the whole idea of school closures. We're grappling with maintaining education and trying to close the gap in inequalities. We're grappling with how do we connect with remote learning systems. And remote learning is not only about rural India, it's about within even the city of Delhi, because of issues about bandwidths, issues about connectivity and so on. And so as of now, we are involved with rapid pedagogical interventions and, digital models and so on and so forth. So looking at learning, I think sometimes when I look at the way that this pandemic has torn up the curtain, I would say that it is something which has, because I feel that Kathy had briefly talked about it, it is neglected to promote empathy, to encourage democratic forms of engagement and collaboration among citizens and governments from various regions. I think it has brought out an underbelly also in different ways. And in this context, I think educators, policymakers in the broad field of global education must demand more global citizenship education to address these strange pedagogical shortcomings which have been revealed by the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, we were supposed to have respect for human rights, but we see racism across the world. We were supposed to be talking about development of global responsibilities, and yet there are so many fake news that come across. Environmental awareness, and yet we see the way that fires have gone about. So what is it that we have or not done, or have not done, where this kind of understanding has perhaps not really permeated into the consciousness? Have we just left it at activity-based learning? I think it is so essential now that we have to carry out some kind of cooperation with other citizens in different ways across the world, because I think this catastrophe has directly highlighted the urgency of developing global educational alternatives that go beyond romanticizing notions of citizenship. I think it has become even more necessary that people like you and me, policymakers, organizations, encourage reflections that expand our possibilities to address pedagogical dimensions of global challenges through schools. I know that in many ways people will say we have been connected by the corona, but this is a sort of a negative connectivity that I find. This is the way I look at it, because in fact, the corona has divided us. It has divided homes. People can't meet each other. People are afraid. People, at least in India, have attacked doctors and nurses who are looking after them because they are scared of it coming. Where is the empathy? Where is the care? It is so essential that and it's not only about India. I see it across the world, irresponsible kind of behavior towards people. So I think it is very, very essential that we look at it and see how do we really incorporate all these values of 21st century learning into the global citizenship education program. We started it somewhere in the 1990s. I know the Oxford University started some aspects of it, but it's been nearly 20-25 years. The adults who were supposed to have known it as children today are the same adults who are out there, but what's happening to us? And so I think we have to look at, and I would just like to mention a few of the things that as a school one is trying to do and as a community one is trying to do. I think we need, just as much as we need a vaccine to protect against a viral disease, we need global education and understanding to fight against prejudice and hatred. Right now, the immediate focus is to actually look at the sustainable goals. As far as India is concerned, we are grappling with SDG 2, that's zero hunger. We're grappling with SDG 4, that is quality education. We're grappling with SDG 6, that we don't have clean water and we've got floods going on. And we're grappling with SDG 1, we want to look at no poverty. And there have been huge issues of migrant movements, of migrants moving across and having issues where they have not been able to get on with their lives. And so I think we have to, the way we are looking at SDGs is that we are connected with the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education, which is a UNESCO subsidiary, which essentially is looking at social and emotional learning, integration of social and emotional learning into the SDGs and training this. And so this is actually what it is it's a part of a 10-country, 50 school, 500 student project, where the training is in the area of social emotional learning, which has helped us to assess the impact of global citizen courses on the way schools operate. So the curriculum that has been designed is to understand issues of terrorism, migration, governance, rights and duties, identity and violence. So currently we are doing this and we are part of this pilot program that is across 10 countries, bringing together teachers and students. And so this global citizenship curriculum is involved with several pedagogies, which are very 21st century based. And as mentioned by Hamish, looking at skills of collaboration, looking at digital pedagogies, looking at multi-censoring rewarding, looking even at gamification or inquiry or reflection. And so the whole understanding of SDG 4 focuses on that. So we're trying to target societies composed of diverse races and classes, and how do we go forwards and demystify this whole understanding of global citizenship. So this, for now, I would like to stop here and leave the place to you. Thank you, Rita, for that.
Thank you, Ms. Amita. Rightly so, I think global citizenship is deeply embedded in SDGs, especially through SDG 4. That's my take on it. I feel ensuring inclusive and quality education for all and promoting lifelong learning is the way to be by, I think, 2030. The international community needs to ensure, I think they've agreed to ensure all the learners acquire those knowledge and skills which is needed to promote sustainable development. So we cannot really deny its worth, its requirement. And yes, you do bring in a totally different perspective, and it's not just remote locations, it's within the city, within the capital cities. We have certain locations which are really fending for themselves. They're trying to find space in the broadband width. That is the problem at least in India presently. Yes, we do also understand the important social and emotional learning that you so highlighted, brought the entire conversation to a totally different. But then I have one person who's not really product of very good schools, very honestly. And I've seen that when I've learned through the first principles, I've learned through the climb through the ladder and things like that. Till you do not get on to the grassroots level, till you do not actually make it happen, till we actually are engaged in the theories and discussion, till we do not really, Ms. Amita talked about a project that the school is doing. There are other schools also. There is one in Phagwara who's doing a huge project, and at times you are not the pilot, you're not the one who's piloting the project. But then if you just kind of join the bandwagon, try to contribute with the collaboration, I think we all need to just make it happen in whichever form. At times you're the leading person, at times you're the person, one of the members, and I think we should just kind of get that thing out of our minds and join whoever is doing a good work. There's a very nice term, one of the leading, I think, ex-Secretary of Education India uses, nexus of good. It's time we all created a nexus of good and brought the good things to the fore and carried on with our. So thank you very much for that, Dr. Wattal. And coming back to Hamish, if I may, you talked about something related to Brit School Partnership Program, I'm aware of because our school is also one of the Brit schools. So we have had this partnership and we really learned a lot from there, and students have has been engaged. There's something called Nexus School Network Program that you talked about. If you could just tell a little about that. Also, I was interested, and there are a few questions that have come in related to Australia Asian Youth Forum. So little about maybe a minute or two about each program, if you could tell us.
I'll be very, very brief, Rita, because I really love the passion and provocation from Amita. Actually, it's wonderful to get the conversation going. But look, I suppose like the Bridge program, if the Bridge program is, you imagine, as you know, is very much sort of a one-to-one model of how do we create those sister school relationships that last a long term. We've really developed the Nexus program, and so it stands for New Education Experiences Uniting Schools. And so within the Nexus program, instead of it being about one-to-one, it's about picking a centralized focus and allowing a collective of international educators to share their pedagogical resources and learnings in that focus. So we imagine, for example, the focus could be on literacy, it could be on STEM, it could be on wellbeing, but it's the importance of that focus and then allowing the expertise, and we know that teachers are natural sharers, to actually collaborate on a key focus together and create a partnership through the collective rather than just through one-to-one. So that's the Nexus program. The ASEAN Youth Forum is about looking at, obviously, the Southeast Asian nations that Australia is connected to across our neighbourhood. And that's very much looking at the issues that often become a focus for ASEAN. So trade and climate change, and it's giving students the opportunity to take on the role of Philippines or Singapore or Brunei. And then in that forum, the students are actually treated very much as delegates of those countries. And I think what we find is once we treat young people as equal adults and we say, right, the honorary delegate of Singapore, they suddenly step up. They get really passionate about their country and about wanting to create shared good. What's really interesting is that students come into it with the natural inclination to collaborate. They always want to share. But as the day progresses, they realise that sharing is actually really hard. And it comes to Amita's point of the crisis that we sometimes find ourselves in, of countries realising that there are so many challenges inside one country that then being able to give to another country becomes such an even bigger challenge. And I think that's partly the situation we find with global citizenship, that it often feels like another thing, another problem, another challenge. And I know that educators feel tired by feeling like, oh, I'm sure global citizenship is just another thing. And I think it's important, and I'm sure we'd all agree, that global citizenship can be really well integrated into day-to-day learning in classrooms. It's not an added extra, and it's about changing the choices that educators make and opening up choice to young people.
Yeah, thank you, Hamish. Yeah, you're right. We are, a question for Kathy, if it's okay. You talked about OECD and the global competence that has come into the questions, assessments that you talked about. What I'm finding little queer here is 2018 is the first time when this global competence paper came into the assessments. And I think Australia also decided to focus on global citizenship in this same year, or was it prior to that?
It was probably a bit earlier than that. Our last set of national goals for education, which were agreed to in 2012, also had a pretty strong focus on global citizenship.
So why, if the focus was global citizenship, why the decision not to come onto the OECD global? That is a question.
Well, that's a very provocative question, Rita, and Hamish and I.
See, as an Indian, this is the first time we are going into this PISA test, so you can always tell an Indian.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Hamish and I would probably like to have, you know, our Minister of Education here around the table to explain, you know, why a country that did in 2012 make a commitment to put the world into world-class education and to really focus on developing our kids as global citizens, and yet we did not take part in that PISA Global Competence test. I should say the Global Competence is part of an innovative assessment strategy that the OECD has with PISA. So they've looked at teamwork, and next year they're going to look at creativity and how can you make assess that as well. And that really fits in with what we've all been talking about, which is the capabilities that young people require to be active global citizens. And we need to be looking at ways that we can deeply teach and learn about those capabilities, but also our ability to monitor and track and perhaps assess them. And that's a big global conversation at the moment. How do we do that? And we can't just say it can't be done. And I think a lot of the countries that didn't take part in that OECD Global Competence test, including Australia, are doubtful that you could actually test for global competence. But if we don't start or even try, we're never going to value it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally get you. Absolutely. If it's okay with people, I can start taking question and answers from the audience because they are a whole lot of building up and we might just run out of time. We have Manoj Kumar from Patna, who's trying to, from Radiant International School, he wants to know, with nationalism on the rise all around the globe and globalization taking a beating, how do we promote internationalism, especially among youngsters? Anybody, any panelist could take that question.
Amita should come in there first.
Right. I think, this has become such a fashion to have right governments all over the globe. And I always believe that these are cycles that happen. These are cycles in the world. They're not here to stay. They keep moving around, But the point I'm trying to make here is that it's very essential to understand that the world is a family and we cannot live in picket fences. We would collapse if we did that. And that is why we have people like Hamish and Kathy sitting over here and talking about the whole understanding of global citizenship. And thank God for that, because I do know one thing, that even when there were in the past, in other countries, when there were issues like this going on, I know that as a school, we took on the mantle and we wrote letters to Mandela when he was in Robben Island, because we were absolutely against the whole movement that was going on over there, the whole apartheid. And Mandela, the first school Mandela visited in India was our school, because he kept those letters from the children. So also we stood up and we had a voice when we were talking about Palestine and said, no one across the world has the right to feel mediocre, has the right to feel small. We all have the right to equally rise together. I know that we did a wonderful project through this whole understanding through the AEF with the Aborigines in Australia, the indigenous people, and the indigenous people Maoris in New Zealand, and our indigenous people, the Adivasis, an art project. And the kind of commonalities we found within that was amazing. So as long as we keep looking at the commonalities that bring us together and not divide us, we have to, as educators, whatever anybody says, whatever any government does, we have to stand up for it and say, no, the world is my family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That's what we say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That really answers the question. Thank you. We have a whole lot of questions from Miss Nisha Aneja. She's talking about reopening of schools in the pandemic. I'm sorry, Nisha, I'm not taking that question. We will touch this question when we have this theme in one of our webinars. Then we have Lady Asha Sharma from Indian Learners Own Academy. She also talks about how can we open school in safe mode. If time permits, we'll come back to these questions, which are not really related to the topic. Then we have another one from Shweta Sinha, again, how to develop interest among students on online learning, not taking it. Okay, generic question, yet it can, few of the panelists can probably discuss this. This is from Kumari Kanchan, she says, what are the ways of developing global citizen? A very wide question. We can just probably pick up certain things. I mean, if a few people can, few of you can talk about how can we actually develop global citizens. Yeah. Hamish, would like to take that?
Look, I would just say, I think the first word that came to my mind, Rita, was storytelling. I think through powerful storytelling, and Amita has just given you a wonderful example of when you start to talk about inspiring stories, you actually start to engage the one thing that the world needs, which is empathy. Unless we start to understand how to listen and observe and question without bias, and that's a very, very hard skill. And I think that's where empathy is more than just being sympathetic. And we know that, but it is actually quite hard initially. Through storytelling, we can actually help people start to understand how we do share that commonality and also appreciate the diversity. I do think of, for example, a lovely documentary film called I Am 11, which was a film documenting the lives of 11-year-olds around the world. And if you play that to students who are of similar age, they suddenly realize, wow, like we all kind of somewhat feel the same. And that's an important step. So that would be my response to that, Rita.
Thank you. Anybody wants to elaborate further?
Well, I'd just probably come in and make a comment about technology, because if there's one thing that has happened with the coronavirus is that we have been a lot more online. And I just think of the seminar that we jointly held a few weeks back, Rita, with the students speaking about their experience of remote learning, speaking to children across the world in 2 different countries, and fantastic opportunity to actually to communicate, to become friends, to learn something. And the technology today, when we started Bridge, it was almost a sort of phone and very clunky email. Now you can see people, you can go on virtual tours of their home or their school, or there's lots of ways that you can actually get a sense of each other. So I think we've really got to use the technology as a tool. We can be having common classes. We can do professional learning together with our teachers. How exciting would it be?
Yes. I remember the initial nudging and trying to smile under their, hiding their smiles and things like that. There was a commonality in that. And later on, when they start discussing their challenges and what they're liking or they're not liking, it all seemed as if they're from the same set of people there. It did not really seem as if they're from Australia or India. So yes, that exercise really helped. True. Exactly. Yeah, coming on to continuing with the same theme, there is a question from Virender Singh, Senior Coordinator. He says, what kind of role schools can play to develop global citizens? We have kind of touched upon it, but then specific to schools, can we do a little more to develop these global citizens? Dr. Amita, if you could take that question.
Yeah, sure. I think the most important thing is that we have to take out 21st century skills from the textbooks and make them alive. They've been lying around in some cupboard or in some shelf, and they've been spoken about in every forum, but they've not become breathing, living entities. The moment you take out something and give it a human perspective, so we keep talking about it, so just bring it into your entire thought process, into your curriculum, into your activities, into your daily conversations, into the minds of children in such a way that they can't just do without them. So whether it is collaboration, if you collaborate, you know that you are nobody without the other. The interdependence of life, if you bring that in. The communication, because without communication, where do you go? You know, so, and you can communicate through music, you can communicate through dance. Languages need not help you communicate, but it is fantastic. And I have been pushing this to all students. Learn a new language during the pandemic. Learn it, because it will help you, whatever you like. Because language does a lot of interesting things with your mind. You don't need gamification, you need language, you know. And at least even for my age, I'm trying to learn German because I want to get away from Alzheimer's. I'm a little worried. So because of my age, so to speak. So the point I'm saying is that as long as we bring in the skills and we make them happen, we will have an absolutely living school, and automatically citizenship and, you know, the whole, what is the terminology, and will become alive and will become a part of the school, will become the school really.
Very true, very true. I have observed in this pandemic, there are a whole lot of student-led competitions that are happening, student-led events that are happening, student-led webinars that have happened. There is a group of tweeting birds on the Twitter, which is talking about SDGs, and we have SDG for children, we have SDG Chopal happening in India. So a lot of people who are working towards this, and you see a lot of children, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds who are working towards, of course, they're talking about sustainable goals in their own ways, but at least they're sensitized at this age. So a whole lot of things are happening at present. Yeah, there's another question, if you could take up. Very simple question, and it comes from Sonal Rawat, and she just simply asks, what does truly global mean? What does truly global mean? Anybody, I mean, open to the floor.
We could probably all have a go at that in one sentence or 3 words.
I think, yeah.
Amita?
It's they're not just probably talking with the geographic.
You're putting me on
I would take this question and probably say,
No, if I may say, and Kathy is very, very cool. She's put me on the spot. But I think what for me it is that a truly global is a person who's not divided by borders. That's who truly global is. You know, I agree that there's a passport, but in your mind, you don't need a passport for your mind. You may have a passport for your body, but now we don't need visas anymore. We're all over the place. So for me, a man or a woman or a child who understands that we are all people and we need to connect without borders. That's a truly global person.
And the person who defines his roles and responsibilities in relation with humanity, not with a certain country and things like that. So probably that is what I will call a truly global person. Another question from Delvin Keysbury from Melbourne. He asks, what homework would you give the audience today to take action of developing global citizens? That's a wonderful question. I really like this question. Thank you, Delvin, for that. What homework would you give the audience today to take action on developing global citizens?
Okay, I just want, that's a great question. And I just wanted to focus in on what Amita was saying before about mindset and skill set, the global citizen. So my piece of homework advice would be to think in your own context for your students, or your school. What mindset do you want your students to have to be truly global citizens? And then what sort of skill set they're going to require, what capabilities and knowledge and skills to be able to achieve that. So my homework.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I, Rita, can I add on to that?
Yes, Dr. Amita.
I think Kathy is absolutely bang on, and I think we must have a heart set. We must create an emotional compass.
Yeah.
The heart set, you know, that's a huge perspective together. You know?
No, I really like that word. I really like that word. Mindset, instead of mindset, we are already talking about growth mindset, and we can call it, change our version to heart set. Hamish, would you like to add on? It's a lovely question that has come up.
Yeah, no, I know, Delvin. So great question, Delvin. It's always important to have something you can explore. I think for me, what highlights our ability to understand some of the interconnection that we've talked about is to go and explore like visual ways of seeing that interconnection. And I'm a bit of a self-confessed data nerd. I love the way that we can now see data living and breathing. And so a little bit of homework I would suggest is go and have a look at something like the Harvard Globe of Economic Complexity. It sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but it's a really dynamic way to see how the world is connected in all sorts of ways. It trades in the movement of materials and people and all sorts of things like that. There's the marine traffic map. There's all sorts of fantastic ways that visualize the world now in ways where we suddenly just see how the world is this living, breathing, interconnected entity. And I think it really connects to what Amita has been saying. And so in terms of homework, go and find some of those really visualized world data mapping tools and feed your own curiosity, because curiosity about the world is what we know children come to school with. And sometimes curiosity is kind of taught out of them. So giving ourselves the permission to be curious and to ask deeper questions is always a wonderful bit of homework. So enjoy that one, Delwyn.
Thank you, Hamish. Then there is a question, person hasn't written the name. Question is there any specific curriculum in the school to develop global citizens? I think Hamish already talked about it when he was talking. It's covered in his presentation. Presentation will be shared to all the attendees. And if you come to specific to Cambridge Assessment International Examination, I know there is a global citizenship curriculum. You can go onto that website. And then we have, if OECD has started assessments on global citizenship, I'm sure you'll find it there. Whole lot of state boards, whole lot of countries have come up with curriculum on global citizens. So I will take on the next question for the panelists. I've answered that question for you. We have one question by Dr. Amita. Again, I like the question. How to overcome the misconception that language is a barrier in becoming global citizen? Anybody can take that question.
Well, I think language is a huge topic, Rita. It's a really challenging one for Australia because learning second languages has been a huge area of complexity, and how do we help students navigate second languages? Rather than get into all the complexity of that, I would say too, there are lots of exciting ways where technology is beginning to support ways that we can communicate through Google Translate or Microsoft Translator, things that are beginning to help us bridge that gap. And there are doorways into actually communicating. The other one I would say about language is also the opportunity for the development of different intercultural ways of respect as a way to develop a form of language. So how we greet people in Indonesia is different from maybe how we greet people in New Zealand or in India. And so that also becomes a language of connection and a language of communication. And I think there are always ways to build confidence, not only just what we say, but also what we do.
So are we agreeing to what she's saying? Do you think it's not a misconception? It's actually a reality. Do you really think that a language is a barrier?
No, of course not.
So how do we overcome this?
No, I think Hamish has made such an important point. I mean, I think it's self-explanatory because in so many ways, what I think, if I can deconstruct what he's saying is that how can language be a barrier? There were, let's go right back to when we were sort of hanging around in caves. There was no language there, but we connected. The point I'm saying to you is there are so many other ways of connections. I mean, I would say that Bollywood reaches every single country in the world. Do they understand Hindi? Of course not. It's about joy. It's about music. It's about art. I mean, language is not just the written language or the verbal language. It's about an entire culture. I mean, when we teach a language, we don't just say that, you know, abacada, we don't teach it like that. We teach the culture, and it's the culture that connects human beings, and automatically the language follows. So the culture comes first and the language follows in many ways. So it's the food that connects us. It's the sometimes the pain that connects us. Sometimes, I mean, you know, when a person has a situation or is happy or is joyful, you don't have to have him saying, I am miserable today. You can make out by the body language. So there are so many things. So I think we should not let any obstacle be there in any way for connecting with each other.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a beautiful thought to close with. I am very particular about the time. I can see that we are just about 5-6 minutes beyond the time. But still, before we close in, a last closing remarks by every panelist would be lovely to have. We could start in the same order of starting. If we could have Hamish give closing remarks before we wind up for the day.
Look, I would take that whole idea of being able to develop the understanding through evaluating your own mindset on the world, like where do your assumptions become barriers, looking at the skill set, empathy, respect, and looking for that mutual resolution. And I would love to borrow that word of heart set from Amita. That is just beautiful. You know, making sure that we deeply care about each other. So that would be my 3 takeaways.
Okay. Something we haven't really spoken a lot about is how do we get there? So some people ask questions about what does it look like in a school, what should we do, and so on. I think what we do have to acknowledge, there's lots of opportunities that you can utilise in the curriculum to develop global citizens' mindset, skill sets and heart sets. But you've got to invest in supporting your teachers. And I think school leaders are really important here to ensure the school leader is really going to understand why children becoming global citizens is for all students. It's not just for some students. It's actually, the UN is telling us, and UNESCO and OECD, it's for every student. So we have to support our teachers. We have to bring our school leaders together and ensure that they're going to be committed to lead this in their school. So we have to work at it. It's not something that can just happen.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Amita.
Yeah, so I think that, and I'm saying this with complete honesty, that when you have organizations like the Asia Education Foundation, and there are organizations like this, I see it in front of me, I think the world is in a safe place, because I do believe, and as far as global citizenship is, it's there. I can see it happening in front of me with my friends speaking. But what I do believe is that what Antonio Guterres said this time during the Mandela Day, when he said that if we don't stand together, we will fall apart. And that's very important. So that itself brings you close. That itself makes you feel more, and I hate the word tolerance, more accepting of the other and not demonizing the other. We should stop the whole demonizing culture and bring that into the minds of children from the school, and that for me is what actual global citizenship is.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Wattal. Thank you, Hamish, and thank you, Kathy. It has been wonderful discussion. I totally believe this is a time of collaboration, this time for acceptance, this time for doing things together, making things happen, whether you are the curry maker, you are the recipe creator, or you are the follower of the recipe. Kathy brought out that aspect that it's very important to structure it as well. I mean, probably not all of us can follow the heart and do it. Some people may not have that skill set, the heart of that kind, then they have to develop a skill set. So few people create template with their creativity. Certain people follow the template with their discipline, and in our own way, we all achieve what is desired for this beautiful world. So with these thoughts, I close this seminar, and thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful, 1 hour, little over 1 hour, and hoping for more collaboration in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Thank you, Hamish. Thanks, Rita. God bless. Bye.
Thank you to all the attendees over there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hamish. Lovely to see you. Bye.
You too, Amita. Thank you so much.